Previously on agentpalmer.com, 100 Things We've Lost to the Internet is a comprehensive and contemplative reading experience for everyone. Meet Me at the Food Court, Jasper Mall examines a dying breed. And since the last episode, I've added Sam to the list of people I trust to suggest books for me to read. This is the Palmer Files, episode 58, featuring Professor Robert Eskra, Esquire, a lawyer turned teacher who is here to tell the tale of how he became a lawyer and then why he isn't, as well as higher education, the archer's mindset, being a jack of all trades, and much, much more. Are you ready? Let's do the show! Hello and welcome to the Palmer Files. I'm your host, Jason Stershik, also known as Agent Palmer, and on this 58th episode is Professor Robert Eskra, Esquire. And while that may seem like quite a title, Professor Robert Eskra, Esquire encapsulates Rob's past and present and future. He did pass the bar, hence Esquire. He is currently officially an assistant professor, but as we all know, outside of academia, the prefix to professor isn't as important as it is inside academia. So the prefix to professor is for everyone to know what he does now, and the lack of it is what could be in his future. What you are about to hear is how Rob became a professor through going to law school, taking the bar exam, actually being a lawyer, and then choosing another way. Of course, there are a few small meandering tangents, but that is to be expected. Before we get going, remember that if you want to discuss this episode as you listen or afterwards, you can tweet me at Agent Palmer and this show at The Palmer Files. You can find Rob on his Twitch stream where he streams A Professor Plays and Big Brain streams on twitch.tv/FPEskra. That's FPSKRA. Or you can visit his YouTube channel by going to tinyurl.com/bigbrainlecture. Don't forget, you can see all of my writings and rantings on agentpalmer.com. And of course, email can be sent to this show at thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. So without further ado, his name is Rob, and he doesn't want to work. He just wants to bang on the table all day. Rob, I know that you at one point were a lawyer in your illustrious career of careers, and that now you are not. So let's start with the easiest question. Why lawyering?
Why lawyering? I don't, it's funny. It's not necessarily the easiest question because I don't think it was one of those things where it was like, I wanted to become a lawyer because, like, I guess the same reason most people probably, like, say that they want to become a lawyer. And that is because, like, it's one, you think it's a job that's going to pay you well. And the way it's portrayed on TV makes it seem like a fairly glamorous and fun job.
Yes. But then again, they make doctoring look glamorous and fun too.
They do. But here's the thing. How many lawyers do you know?
Like me?
Well, like, yeah.
I know 3.
Well, you know 3. Have you ever asked them about what their job is like? I mean, you may have because this is kind of like what you do. But no, I bet the average person, oh, you're a lawyer? That's so cool. And that's where the conversation stops.
Well, I think but you know what? I think in most professions, that's where people stop. Like, exactly. Oh, you're a teacher. Oh, you're a doctor. Oh, you're a nurse. Oh, you're a surgeon. I don't think people want to know anymore because they're afraid of whatever they can conjure as the worst thing. Like, oh, you're a doctor. How was your day? I killed someone. There's no coming back from that, right? Like, even if that's the worst that could possibly happen, you don't ask the follow-up because you are so afraid.
That's kind of the same how lawyers are, because, like, I knew lawyers growing up, and it was like they were looking back, right? I get why they were the way that they were. They were, because they were like, I don't know, they dressed in suits, and they would usually they just had an air of importance around them, and they always looked busy, and you thought it was because they were out doing really cool things, and like this thing that they were at, which was usually some like high school event because they were like the parent of a kid or something. Like, it's like this was like an annoyance so that they could get back to doing the shit that like you saw on TV, and that's again how you picture it, right? And it's like, oh, this is Tom's father. He's a lawyer, and you're like, oh, you're dead. You know a lawyer? And there's like this mystical kind of thing surrounding the profession.
Yeah,
and I wanted to be a part of that because I grew up in a a lower middle class household. My mom worked part-time at a tanning salon. My father, he worked at a design firm. He went to Johnson Technical College and he learned AutoCAD, and that's basically what he's been doing his entire life. But those were my parents were divorced, so like it was two houses. My stepfather, he was like in administration of like a plastic making company.
Okay.
They make bathroom stalls is what they did. So like if you went into like a bathroom, the plastic stalls, like he would make those, or he was in the company that made most of those in the area in which I live. And then my stepmom was like, I'm still not exactly sure what she does, but it's kind of like she does like accounting like work, secretarial work, but like usually administrative assistant is probably the best kind of classification for the type of work she does. And I knew that I didn't want to do any of those things, but like I loved the movie Liar Liar. And being a lawyer looked really fun in that. And I liked Law and Order, and the prosecutors were cool as shit. And then I liked our TV shows like Boston Legal, and defense attorneys look cool as shit, right? And then there was like, as I was in college, there was a show on USA called Suits, which I think lasted. And then the princess, Meghan Markle, she was in that too. Yeah. Right? I'm like, oh, being a lawyer looks real fucking cool.
So hold on.
I'm totally doing it.
So you want to be a lawyer. When you go to school, when you graduate from high school, is that like is it at this point I'm all in? Like
no. That's actually so. Back it up. I originally wanted to be a state trooper.
Okay.
In middle school, I had gone to Camp Cadet.
Do you like rules?
It's well, so that's part of it. It's I like arguing.
Well,
but
who
arguing
doesn't?
there's like an art to argument though, which law school actually provided me a greater appreciation for. But like it's funny though, because after law school, I realized that I sort of already argued like a lawyer in a way, but I didn't know why. Law school taught me why that sort of arguing was good, right?
Okay.
I thought it was just being fun and annoying, and like but it's like legitimately how lawyers argue. And I'll give you an example in a second. But originally I wanted to be a state trooper. And then one of my best friend's father was a state trooper, and he talked me out of it. He's like, don't do it. You're smarter than this. You don't need to do this. It's awful. And he was like on the verge of retiring, and he retired like by the time I graduated high school. So I go and I was a criminal justice major in college, and one of my CJ teachers was an attorney. And again, there was that like air, and I'm like, well, I could do that. And my advisor, she was like, yeah, you're smart. You could totally you could become an attorney. And I was like, all right, well then that's what I will do. And so like that's everything kind of like aimed that way. Went through college, applied, took the LSATs, which is the test to get into law school. I did okay on them. I didn't study for them, which I should have. If I had studied for them, I may have gotten into a better law school.
Okay.
Not to say that the law school I went to was bad.
Is it like a draft? Like, okay, all right, you've aced the LSATs, so you're pick one, and Harvard's going to take you, and you got like a C, so you're not going to the Ivy League.
So sort of,
okay.
Actually. So there's a website that you use. It's called Oh, I can't even remember the name of it, which is funny because I actually have to show it to students now. As like when they want, I say, go to this website and you're going to have to, this is what you can get yourself into. But it's a website and you do everything for the LSAT. It's LSAT prep. You can purchase training courses, you register for the LSAT. And then once you get your score, you get your scores through that website. And then it has like a scale from lowest score to the highest score. And for every school, like that, there's a link to every school where you can apply, and you can click on the school, and it will show you your chances of getting in based on your LSAT scores, based on a combination of your LSAT and your GPA in college.
Okay.
And there was always kind of like a sweet middle spot, like the guaranteed in, and you have a slight chance of getting in, but then there's like the sweet middle spot where it's like you're in here, it's like it's worth applying if you fall in this little shaded area. And Harvard and all those Ivy League ones are way at the top.
Yeah.
And then there were some schools, like, so I went to what was Widener University Law School,
Okay.
in Harrisburg, which is now called what's it called, the Commonwealth Law School.
Okay.
Because they separated from Widener University Law is its own thing in Delaware now, and then Commonwealth is its own thing. But I can still say I graduated from Commonwealth, sort of, but I still call it Widener University School of Law. And their shaded area was very large because they were essentially an open enrollment law school. And the way they could do that is they would accept most people for the first year, and then by the end of the third year, drop the bottom third.
Oh, nice.
So like if you didn't make it in the bottom third, they just kicked you out. And so it's like you wasted 15 grand.
So, all right, real quick, but like you are how far along in your undergrad before you switch? Which, by the way, you were at least on the right track, because my understanding of higher education is that if you were criminal justice, the switch to pre-law or whatever, not crazy. It's not like you went from art to pre-law, which would have been like, oh, you're going to spend an extra year at least.
Here's where the misunderstandings begin.
Oh, no.
You don't need a particular degree to go to law school.
Okay.
You just need a bachelor's degree. That's it.
Oh, all right.
And the requirements to become an attorney are you need a bachelor's degree, a law school degree, and you need to pass the bar. And that's it. Except in California. In California, you just need to pass the bar.
Wait. So I don't need a bachelor's degree?
Or a law school degree. You just need to pass the bar. But California has decided that you can do that. So to counteract, they're just going to make their bar exam the worst one in the country. And it's legitimately the hardest bar in the country. And so, but what happens is you don't need to go to law school, but if you can pass that bar, you become an attorney in California and also in every other state in the country. Whereas, like, I passed the bar in PA. PA only has reciprocity with 35 other states.
I mean, that's still pretty good. I mean, it's 2/3. I mean, it's not bad.
PA is pretty decent. It's like, and then there's states like Jersey who has a much easier bar, and they don't have reciprocity with nearly enough.
Okay.
But we're in PA, and we like to shit on Jersey anyway.
All right, so I want to go back to young Rob, and you are going to law school. Mm-hmm. You've just done 4 years of undergraduate.
Mm-hmm.
Are you looking for, like, I know it's your career. I know it's what you've decided at this time you're going to do. Mm-hmm. But you're going to spend, you just spent 4 years after just having spent 12 years in school. You are now, of your own accord, opting for more school.
For more school, yes. Absolutely. I always liked school.
Okay.
I didn't like school until college. That's when I liked school.
I'm with you.
It's that environment suited me. The idea that, like, you know, it's kind of, I don't know, it's the whole the college environment. That was like where I came. That's where I kind of grew into myself. I didn't really find who I was personality wise until college, like late college. We're talking.
I cannot empathize, sympathize, and all the eyes is with you enough, right? Because I was a kid. Yeah, I mean, yeah, band and cross country and stuff, but those things aren't really getting out there. Because if you're in band, you're in band with a lot of other people who are in band that are fairly like you. And not to put too fine a point on it. And then when I get to college, student government, like the college newspaper, maybe a little bit of other like committees and things, like I actually found that like, oh wait, I don't mind doing these other, like, I don't mind volunteering. I don't mind giving my time to something bigger than myself, right? Like I was whatever the college accreditation that comes through every 5 or 8 or 10 years or whatever it is.
Yeah. It's middle states around here.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was the student representative for middle states on my campus. So like I did all these things. You wouldn't have caught me dead in high school doing any of these things, right? Like and even freshman year, I'm the atypical, let's make this Animal House. Like I did. What do you mean I have to go to class? Like I was absolutely probably more just my first semester, really. And then I got put on academic probation and spent the second semester trying desperately to get off.
Yeah. I had my first semester. I was still in like high school mode. You have to go to class every day. And then I realized in my second semester, oh, you don't. That's when I had my troublesome semester. Was my second semester.
Everybody's got one. I feel like everybody's got that one. It's like, oh wait. And then you come to your realization of like, oh no, that's what this is.
The key is the faster you come to that realization, the better off you are.
I don't know if that's true, because I feel like you, like I guess in full disclosure, not that I have to, but in full disclosure, the only reason I was on academic probation was attendance. Now, I argued till I was blue in the face that I had passed all of my tests and I didn't have any failing grades. Yeah. But at a certain point, absences did not bode well for your grades. So if you got a B, if you missed enough classes, you were getting a D or worse. Yeah. And as a freshman, first semester freshman, I had a lot of 8 and 9 a.m. classes that I hate them.
I teach some now and I hate them. It's awful. 8 a.m. classes are the worst thing that could have ever been created.
So you are choosing to go to more school. And you're liking it at this point, which I can understand why. By the time I hit junior and senior year of college, I'm loving that. Can I be a student forever? Like, do I have to go to the real world is my thought junior year, right?
That was it. Yeah. The also the fun thing about first year law school too is that you actually can't work. You're not allowed to. They won't let you, if you're going to law school full time, your first year, they won't allow you to work at all, period. You have to like sign an agreement with the school that you're not going to.
Well, hold on. Like, at all? Like,
like you can't have a part-time job, because the idea is that everything needs to be, and honestly, if you're going full-time first year law school, like, you need that time to be, because I never bought books or took notes in college. I learned very quickly law school is very different. And like, so you spend your time reading. Have you ever seen the movie The Paper Chase?
Yeah.
All right. The beginning of the movie, what's his face walks in, right? He opens the book. He just points at a kid and says, brief this case. Yeah. That's legit. Like my wife, who I met in law school, which is funny. She was in a class that happened. Like one of their professors walked in,
big fan of the movie,
on a girl.
Clearly,
I wasn't a huge fan of the movie.
No, but this professor must. But
this professor was. Yes. Yeah. She called on a girl, and the girl, I guess there was an issue, and that like the instructions for the first class weren't that clear about what pages to read, and this girl realized that she had read the wrong pages and had admitted that, got her ass torn into. And she like ran out of the room, like nearly in tears. And so that was like my wife's introduction to law school. My introduction was a little bit better because we had a professor he was a phenomenal guy. His name was John Dernbach. And I still he's still one of my favorite teachers in the world. I actually, when we do end up talking about my transition, I actually I called him with I'm having a crisis, and he kind of talked me through it, which was great. But he was a much nicer person, and he started class off explaining what was to be expected, which was I think a much kinder way to, get people into, because you needed to, once you got into it, class would start, and it's taught Socratic. So meaning the students really do most of the talking. The teacher just acts as a proctor. Right. Yeah. And so it's you have to read these cases before class. And when it comes in, it's okay, explain to me the facts. What are the relevant facts? And so one kid would have to do that. All right, what did the court decide? This. What was the rule, right? And then once all of that was established, then a conversation would be had about why that rule was made and how does it apply to the facts. And if there was any precedent that they decided on, how does that play in? Are there any little alterations to the rule that were made in subsequent cases, right? And so the thing is about law school is it doesn't teach you law. What it teaches you is how to think differently about problems. And how to, when you approach a fact pattern, how do you determine a solution to the problem, right? And before I mentioned that I had already argued like a lawyer to a certain degree, without realizing it. But now it was throughout this first year that I realized that was already my natural kind of way of thinking about things. This just further refined it, and I was good at it.
So here's my question.
It enjoyable. Yeah.
For fellow students in that first year.
Yes.
Were you lucky in that you were already naturally arguing that way? Do you find people that were just, I can't talk like this, or yes, I don't know how to think? And I wonder too, is it I can't think like this, or they're teaching you to think, or is it the arguing of I don't know how to place things?
The difference is because you come straight from college, and you succeed in college primarily through memorizing whatever was taught and regurgitating it back to your professors, either through multiple choice exams or essays. Right?
But that's also high school for the most part, too.
Yeah, so high school and college, right? Yep. So for your first 16 years, that's learning. And law school, that's not learning anymore. There's nothing to memorize. Memorizing the rule only gets you partway there. You then need to understand why the rule was established and then how to apply that rule to different fact patterns.
Okay.
And so it ends up becoming, and this is actually an example I use in class currently to teach the way that lawyers think, right? And it comes from a video. Stephen Colbert interviewed Ruth Bader Ginsburg, may she rest in peace. And he asked her to settle the age-old debate of whether or not a hot dog is a sandwich.
Okay.
And as opposed to a lesser person immediately trying to make an argument for one or the other, the first thing RBG does is she says, what is the definition of a sandwich? And I'll ask you the same thing. How would you define a sandwich?
I'm one of those people that's well, it's definitely bread based.
Okay. So there has to be bread involved.
There has to be bread involved. And I think for the most part, you need bread on top and bottom, because otherwise an open-faced sandwich would still be just a sandwich. You wouldn't have to declare that it's open-faced.
Fair enough. All right.
But to me, to skip to the end for a second, because this has been a thing in a different friend group of mine,
okay,
I agree with a friend who said, and I quote, a hot dog is an American taco. To me, that is that to me, that's where you go instead of it's a sandwich
It's
or
a
not.
sandwich. But see, now again, this is skipping over a crucial step in the process. You're jumping from A to G.
Yes. I do that a lot,
Right?
by the way.
And that's fine. That's fine. That's again how most people go, and that's perfectly. But like to define a sandwich, right? Okay, bread based. That's one element. There needs to be bread. There needs to be bread on two sides of a filling. Right? Now, you define top and bottom, but some could say that it has to be on two sides of the filling.
Yes.
Does that bread have to be, do the two slides that contain the filling have to be completely separated from each other, or can they touch one side?
They can definitely touch.
Because a hoagie can be a sandwich, right?
Or a sub, or
a sub.
Well, pedantically, there's a part of me that goes, if you are making a quote-unquote cheese sandwich, and the cheese is smaller than the bread, then the bread will connect at some point. Period. The end.
That's another great example of how an exception to the rule, right, of the two slices of bread, because by that definition, then, right, it's some sort of filling contained by bread on two sides. The bread can be touching, doesn't have to be completely separated.
Yes.
By that definition, a hot dog is a sandwich.
Yes.
Right. Another way to think about it, this was an example that I used, I remember before law school, and when somebody told me you already argue like a lawyer, was if you were to ask me, what did I have for breakfast this morning?
What did you have for breakfast this morning?
I would have to argue, how would you define breakfast? Is breakfast the first meal of the day, or is it the morning meal?
I would argue that it's the first meal of the day.
If it's the first meal of the day, I had
Although I can't argue that because I contradict myself all the time, because I'm like, hey, do you want to have breakfast for dinner? Which means you can't have breakfast for dinner unless you're planning on skipping every meal.
So then that would be, or if breakfast for dinner indicates that breakfast is a specific category of foods.
Yes.
Right? Because if by the definition of first meal of the day, I had Popeye's chicken sandwich for breakfast.
I had a cheesesteak.
Yeah. Right? When really we would also consider that lunch, though, because lunch is midday meal.
Yes.
And if lunch is midday meal and dinner is late day meal, then breakfast isn't first meal of the day. It's morning meal.
Yes.
So I didn't have breakfast today. Depending upon the definition.
I feel like also, though, but I mean, I guess it depends on how, like, where you want to cite your sources. Breakfast is definitely the first meal of the day in Hobbit land. Because if you don't have breakfast, you can't have second breakfast and 11sies, because clearly you got to have 3 meals before you get to lunch.
And this is exactly why you've stumbled upon why lawyers' favorite answer is it depends. Because you're right, there are different rules in different jurisdictions. Right? The rule for breakfast in our world is different from the rule for breakfast to hobbits, which is different from the rule to breakfast in the land of men. Right? Yes. There is. Breakfast is defined differently, and thus breakfast has to be, is determined differently. In the US, right? Pennsylvania law is slightly different from Jersey law, slightly different from New York law, which is why you have to take 3 separate bar exams to practice in those 3 different states.
So I'm going to skip ahead a moment, right? Because we're having fun with this little exercise, but you've kind of buried the lead a little bit in that we know that this fun banter we're having right here, which we see in the courtroom on television, is clearly not what lawyering is all about.
No, it isn't. That's the problem. This is the fun stuff, right? I was in mock trial in high school. I was sold a false bill of goods, sir, right? You have like conned me into this profession that is not what you like, what everybody believes. Because in law school, this is the conversations you have about everything, right? This is how you talk, and it's fun and it's enjoyable. The only time that you hate your life in law school is during exams, because you only get 1 exam a semester. And it's always at the end, and it's cumulative completely.
Oh, okay. So
every semester you have 5 exams all within 2 weeks of each other. And it's everything you've learned that semester is tested all at once.
So this is my question on that. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. Have you ever seen the movie Real Genius?
Oh, years and years and years.
Because there's that scene in Real Genius where they're doing the finals week study, and the guy is just reading the book, and then all of a sudden he looks up and just starts screaming loudly, and then he looks around while screaming, and then just gets up and runs out of the room, and everybody else is like, "Oh, a seat at the table. Who's going to take it?"
Yes. That's it's funny because in law during the exams you take them in like these big, like there was a big amphitheater that we would take the exams in, and this is how the bar exam was too. It's infuriating. It's basically like you're all sitting there quiet, kind of like getting in your own sort of zone, and some people would have to put earplugs in, right? I never minded the noise of typing. Okay. And so it's a room full of typing. However, there would be people who would get upset at like too much noise or like and I remember distinctly there was an exam where I'm sitting there typing and like the white noise of the clacking of all of these little fingers typing away at their answers going all at once. And then I start hearing this that like cut across everything. And it cut me out of my zone, and I started looking around and I couldn't find it, and I realized the girl who was sitting next to me had a tennis bracelet on, and it was she would, as she like reached to hit the space bar, it would like rub on her laptop. And once I identified it, I was fine. I could tune it out. But it took me like 2 or 3 minutes to identify what that sound was. And it took me out. So it's not far off. Okay. Right. That's what I'm saying. But so those exams suck. But the environment of law schools is a blast. I had a blast in law school. I really did. Every Tuesday we would go out. We would go out and play shuffleboard. Every Thursday night we'd go out and get ham-boned. Friday night, walk into class like hungover as shit, but it was Friday, and kind of the professors kind of knew a little bit. And then the weekends were kind of your own. And then Sunday night you'd get back into reading and prepping for like Monday's class, right? And it was that for 3 years. And the first year is the hardest, and then it gets easier, and then it gets easier. And by the third year, it's just a giant party because you know how to do it now, right? You know where to read. You don't even need to read an entire case. You just know where to look, and you can identify facts, rule, conclusion, done.
So what's the retention rate, right?
In law school?
Yeah. Because it can't be good.
No. So again, my law school kicked out the bottom third. At the end of your first year, they just booted you.
Okay.
Because you're not graded individually; you're graded against each other.
Got it. So it's a bell curve.
Yes, okay. And the way they do it is they would go through, and again, John Dernbach explained his process of grading to me, and the way he would do it is he would have a point system, because the way the exams are, they're all essay, and so it's a fact pattern, and there's one question. Usually one question with multiple parts, but it's basically like, this person's suing for this. What are their defenses? Or some of them would just be spot all the issues.
Yeah.
And those were the worst, but like also provided you the most potential for points. And so you would go through and he had a thing of basically a checklist of things that like people could mention. And for everything that they mentioned, he would mark and then just count up the checks. And whoever got the most got the A, and then you just go down the line and distribute them among the bell curve. And so, like, you could get really lucky and just be with a bunch of stupid people and get a really good grade in law school, or you could get screwed and be with a bunch of really smart people.
Yeah,
I'm still not sure because I met some like really bright people, and I ended up graduating cum laude by the skin of my teeth. So like I said, I was good at it, but like not as good as some kids. Some kids were they blew me out of the water.
So what awaits you after law school? Because
the bar exam.
Okay. Well, let's.
This is actually relevant.
Okay.
To my transition.
Okay.
Because you get out of law school, and then you graduate, and you get maybe a week to celebrate. Because then you immediately have to start studying for the bar.
Now, how long do you study? Now,
2.5 months. It is up to you.
Because you could take 5 months if you want.
You can, but the bar exam is on a date certain.
Okay.
It's always I believe it's always in July, late July or something like that.
So
and
if
then
you
there's
want-
one in February as well.
So if you want to take the first one,
Yes, you get a week and then you got to go.
Okay.
And there are the bar prep courses, which is highly suggested to be taken, start basically a week after law school. And
Okay.
basically you just go right back to school. So like Widener hosted bar
Okay.
prep courses.
Yeah.
So we just stayed at school and basically started going back to class again. And studying for law school exams taught you how to write the bar exam, but did not teach you the information that's on the bar exam.
all right.
What the information that's going to be on the bar exam, because law school teaches you generally how to think like a lawyer using common law. Common law isn't used by Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has its own statutes, and the bar exam teaches you those statutes. So you have 2.5 months to learn 11 different areas of law and all of the relevant stuff that could potentially be taught and asked on the bar exam. And the bar exam is a 2-day exam. First day is 6 hours of essay. The second day is 6 hours of multiple choice.
Now, do you usually figure out your, I don't know, area of expertise when you're covering these 11 areas for the bar exam, or do you kind of have an idea of your area of expertise from law school?
So, I mean, they allow you to explore specialties, and at least at Widener, you did. You don't major in anything in law school. You just go and get a JD.
Yeah.
But you can, like, I got a certificate in advocacy,
Okay.
which is essentially like trial law.
Yeah.
So I learned like courtroom techniques and stuff like that, right? I took classes specifically tailored to that. The bar exam is like generally like you take a couple classes and there are areas that interest others. Like I was interested in criminal law. I always found it fascinating. And con law was fascinating. Constitutional law, excuse me. But like property law, never really found fascinating, even though John Dernbach, my favorite teacher, that's what he taught.
Okay.
Right. I actually got the best grade in environmental law, but it wasn't because I found it interesting. It's because it was a code course, meaning basically you were allowed to have the code book with you on the test. And I was really good at tabbing and highlighting. So I knew where to find the relevant statutes. The bar exam is just basically you learn all you can to regurgitate it over those 2 days, and then you forget everything.
Now, what's the process of, like, you're done with the bar exam?
Mm-hmm.
When do you know?
So the bar exam is taken in July, and we found out in November.
Okay, so what is going through your brain from July through November where it's like, well, because to me...
Mm.
If you screw this up, you can't take the November one because it's too late. So
yeah, the February one is the next one you can take.
Yeah. So
and it's still, but it's like it's $250 a pop to take, and it starts like about halfway through studying for the bar. Like, what the hell did we do? Like, why are we like this is awful. This is legitimately terrible, painful thing to have to go through.
But what do you do? Like, do you take a vacation? Like,
well, yeah. So my wife and I, who we were together there for 2.5 years. Then at that point, we went on vacation for a week.
And
forgot about everything.
But then you come back and you still have months before you know.
Yeah. So you just bury yourself in whatever you're doing.
Okay.
I was working at a country club at the time.
Okay.
As wait staff. My wife went back to she before law school she was a paralegal, so she went back to being a paralegal.
Okay.
And you just kind of like forget about it until that date, because they have the date published when dates, and it's like November X, whatever that date is. So it's coming.
Okay.
I think it was November 11th, and then that day happens.
Yeah.
And scores aren't released until about 2:30 in the afternoon. So you just have to agonize all day waiting. And it's the worst, because again, you're going through like, that was the worst experience I would never wish the bar exam on my worst enemy. It's awful.
So at this point you're thinking, I just don't want to do that again.
Yes.
I hope I passed.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's part of the crisis, is that if I didn't pass, I just spent however many, I'm $250,000 in debt now.
Yeah.
And for what? A JD is great, but like it doesn't really do much for you.
Yeah.
Right. In the moment, you're thinking that, but really a JD does
Yeah.
do quite a bit for you. But anyways, I started like, what if I'm not a lawyer? Like, what can I do? Where do I go from now? Or do I take it again? Do I grit my teeth and try and do it again? There are people I've known who've taken it 3 times before they passed it. Judges who have taken it 3 times before they passed it, right? But then 2:30 hits and you're sitting at your computer and you're just hitting refresh to like try to get the page to refresh. And then all it does is publish names and you just have to hope your name is in that list. And so like you start frantically looking for your name, and luckily mine was there. And so was my wife's, right?
Nice. Okay. All right. So here's the question. You see your name, big sigh of relief.
Oh yeah. It's great. Start applying for jobs.
Is that really the way? Is that okay? Now I can. Who wants me?
So I had actually already started applying for jobs, and I had done really well with an interview with a small firm up near Hazleton, in a small little town called Drums, PA. It was basically just the one guy. And he had a young attorney working with him who had to move with his family somewhere else for another, his wife had gotten a position somewhere, so he just needed to leave, wouldn't go with her. And he had an of counsel, like older attorney who did like estate law, and he just needed we interviewed, and he told me like he does civil law. But and I told him my interest is in kind of like criminal defense lawyer, and he's like, well, if you come in me, I can help you. We can get into some of that. And I was like, this is going to be great, right? And the interview went really well. And he basically, essentially left the interview. He's like, let me know if you pass. And that was essentially the end of the interview, right? Yeah, and then I pass, and so I spend the night celebrating, right? And then the next day I kind of get up and I shoot an email to him. And it was like that afternoon that I got like my official offer. And he's like, I'd like to offer whatever. And here's your salary. And that was like, it's like, holy shit, I'm like legitimately a lawyer. Cause you could start practicing. And I got, you get admitted to the bar through like the ceremony at both the federal and county courthouses, where attorney friends of yours have to make a motion to the court to admit you to the bar. And it's basically they who this person is, and they describe like all of your good qualities. And they say, and at this point I would move that the court admit whomever to the federal bar of the Pennsylvania, United States Middle District of PA, or so whatever the bar is called.
Sure.
And motion granted, and you're a lawyer officially, right? You get your card. There's a party. It's like the honeymoon then happens, right? And then I start going to work. And at first, again, it's kind of like, okay, growing pains, right? It's tiring. You're going into the office, and my first assignment was essentially get familiar with all of these cases. So it's like there's a whole bunch of cases in your desk, or here's a list of cases. I would like you to kind of familiarize yourself with them. And you do that. And I basically read those case files front to back to understand exactly what had happened in them, where they are now, what the facts were, and all that, what were the issues. He had brought me in a couple new client meetings. He had brought me to a couple of short little hearings that he had done. And probably 6 months in, because it was about first summer, I realized I wasn't sleeping at night because I was driving an hour away every day to go to work, and I wasn't in a courtroom. I wasn't, doing the fun stuff.
Yeah.
Having the fun conversations. My boss would lock himself in his office for 8 hours a day. And I'd come in, and I was actually my best friend in the office was the secretary, a woman whose name was Diane. She was amazing. She was a great person, and we got along a lot. But it was just this quiet office where I would go and I would lock myself in my office, and I'd answer the odd phone call. I'd have the odd client meeting, but most of the time it was writing letters, to demand letters or writing briefs.
Yeah.
It's not like there wasn't every once in a while a fulfilling thing that I did. There was a family I remember specifically who I had done. There was this medical malpractice case that had been basically on hold for 10 years. because a whole bunch of things had happened. People had died, attorneys had changed, and all that. And then there was my attorney was waiting on this specific document from a manufacturer of machine that was alleged to have been the cause of a death of a family member.
Sure.
And I had finally gotten the manufacturer to send us the document. Like I made the proper argument, filed the proper motion, argued it in front of the judge, and the judge granted it. And finally, like the manufacturer sent us all of the documents we asked for. And in it was like the thing that we needed. And so like that family was finally like, it wasn't until you came along, like we had almost given up hope and you had like, and so like there were fulfilling moments, but that was like 1 in 2.5 years. And so like I remember that first summer, my wife and I, she was my fiance at that point, were sitting in the pool at my mom's house, and I was just kind of like, is this all there is now? Like up until like there was always the next thing to look forward to, right?
Yeah.
Like college, and then law school, and then all the bar exam, and then trying to get a job. And then once you got the job, it was like, oh, this is just it.
Yeah.
And I had like that like crisis where it's like, this all life is? Like this is what grown-ups do? This sucks. But like I felt bad, like I'm like, no, I put so much time and effort and money into this. Like I have to enjoy this, and I just have to, but I wasn't sleeping.
So the thing I would ask,
Yeah.
before we get to transition, is if you had not made the decision to change careers, would the odd great success have been enough to sustain you? It wasn't, but would you have been able to continue along with that one success is enough?
No,
Okay.
I would not have, because I would only sleep on the weekends. I would sleep Friday and Saturday night like a baby, like fucking stone dead. And then Sunday night, I wouldn't sleep at all. And Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, I just wouldn't sleep. I'd sleep progressively, basically, because I was just more exhausted. Towards the end of the week, I would sleep better, but it was restless sleep.
Now, how does this compare to other people who took the bar with you? Because they're clearly going through different or similar circumstances.
So that's it's there because like, now my wife loved her job.
Okay.
She was working at a nonprofit doing family law, which she loved to do, doing like really good work, helping people who were really in need, doing the fun stuff, being in the courtroom. That was the stuff I wanted to do. I was doing the stuff that she wanted to do. She liked the writing of briefs and sending letters, and I hated that. I wanted to do what she was doing, but she was also really good, and my wife is the better attorney, absolutely, 100%. And she was doing what I wanted to do, and she was happy with it. And then like opportunity after opportunity kept being thrown at her, right? And while I was working at this tiny little law firm, like busting my ass and hating it, she had become, a cabinet member for the mayor.
Wow. Okay.
At the city of Scranton, right? So she had become a cabinet member in that same 2.5-year span. And I was still like, just fucking felt like I was having to pay my dues, right? And so, yeah, I was not in a good place at all. Like, and even my wife would say, like, I was depressed back then. She knew that because my personality had changed. I was flat. I was not like my happy self. Right, I would be tired. I would go disappear and play video games at the end of the night, like, and not in like a good way, not in a healthy way.
So the question then becomes, you're going to make a transition.
Yes.
And because of all the things you've already done and what you've been through, you can do anything. Like I know that, maybe you don't want to. Maybe professional sports passed you by, but, within the professional world, like, you can be a teacher, which is what you chose, but you could also, do marketing or, there are so many anything you can do. So what is the process? I mean, because to me, right?
Yes.
And I want to acknowledge this for the listener. Like, I'm skipping over I want to make a transition because that's such a personal thing.
Yeah.
But you do decide you want to make a transition. How do you decide
where to go?
Because like the world is your oyster.
So the first thing I decided is I needed to get out of there.
Okay.
And so it basically started with just finding any job on that I had qualifications for that like enabled me to apply to.
Okay.
I hadn't made the decision that I wanted to leave the practice of law, just that I needed to get out of that office.
Okay. All right.
And even part of mine was like, okay, maybe I could do this, but as long as I didn't need to commute an hour and a half every day. Like to and back. So an hour and a half, two sometimes. And then so meaning I was leaving my house at 6:30 and not getting back till 7 sometimes.
I gotcha.
And so maybe if I just moved closer.
Yeah.
So it was applying to other law firms, I applied for directorial positions at like Montage Mountain, because I started researching what can you do with a JD or a law degree. And there was like websites. And this should have been a red flag, but there are plenty of websites. It's like other things to do with a law degree. And it's like there are lists of like most satisfying jobs to pay, and none of them had being an attorney. So it was, it was just applying to anything and everything. And finally, one of the interviews I got was for Lackawanna College, which is where I teach now, but it was for an associate dean position. And I remember, I got the interview, and the night before the interview, I come down with some weird stomach bug, like up all night in the bathroom every 20 minutes thrown up. The next day I was awful. Somehow I pulled it together for the hour interview.
Yeah.
Like I drove to the school. I don't know if it was adrenaline or whatever, pulled it together. And then at the end of it was like, by the way, I feel like shit. But I thought the interview went really, really well. And because then the dean of students, so I would have been working under him if I had gotten the job, which I didn't. Spoiler alert. He walked me out of the building. He's like, because in the interview, I was like, I would kind of like to teach if that's a thing that you guys do. And they're like, oh yeah, we absolutely allowed, staff personnel to teach classes. And stuff. Okay. And so as he's walking me out, he's asking me about it. And he's like, so would you really consider teaching? And I was like, yeah, it's like, I think it would be a lot of fun. Like I kind of taught a couple kids in law school. Like we kind of hosted and we would teach each other. And like, I think I'd be good at that. And he's like, well, and the interview went like really well, but I didn't get the job. Right. Agonized for like weeks and weeks and weeks until I finally got, there was an announcement that the job had been filled. It wasn't even like a letter to me. It was like an email saying like they went somewhere else. So I was like, damn it. But my wife had told me, it's like, well, why don't you try to become a teacher then? And so I started looking for teaching jobs specifically because that kind of like piqued my interest. And it was at this point that I called my professor from law school.
Okay. Because
I realized I was having that like crisis. It's like, I want to leave the profession, but I had put all of this money in. And I remember he said, you're about 2 years out now, right? I said, yeah. And he's like, that's the time. He said, there usually comes this part about 2 years out of law school where, you either decide you're going to stay in it or you leave it. And he said, a lot of people who leave it do become teachers. And so I was like, okay. And so I started applying for teaching jobs. And eventually, Lackawanna's had a criminal justice job that opened up. I applied for it, got the interview, nailed the opening interview. There was then a second interview where you needed to teach a 20-minute class. The day of that interview, I spent all day prepping the 20-minute lecture that I needed to give because they had called me that morning saying, oh, would you be able to come in at like 4:00 this afternoon and do this lecture on, and I believe it was the topic that I needed to talk on was police brutality.
Okay.
And I was like, absolutely, sure. And so I spent, all day prepping this 20-minute lecture, PowerPoints and all. And I apparently knocked that out of the park. And I was told by my boss later, it's like, because I finished the thing and I said, oh, by the way, like, I just got the call this morning and this was only about like 6 hours of prep time. So I apologize for it. Apparently they were supposed to call me like a week earlier to give me a week to prep.
Yeah.
And they were floored that what I had presented, I had only prepped in a day, because they had done several interviews with the requisite week time to prep, and they weren't apparently any good compared to mine. Like they all looked at each other after that and they said, he's it. And so that was a huge boost to my confidence. And like, that was like by the what is it where you like reinforce your biases? Like they did that to me. Like, oh yeah, this was the right decision afterwards when they told me that. But yes, that was the transition was that, because I had hated the job that I was in, realized I wanted to get out, through the process of applying, kind of discovered that teaching is where I wanted to be. And then once I started teaching, I realized that this was my calling. This was what I was supposed to be. And I don't know why I took this long backwards route to get here.
Well, I will tell you, as someone who has been searching for my next professional career, I am not convinced I know where I'm going to end up, which is one of the reasons that I'm trying so many different avenues to figure out what it is. Because I honestly believe there are people, and I have talked to them on this show, but I've also met them in real life, that literally know what they're going to do. You know, I don't think I was ever one of those people. Like, I just do not think I was ever one of those people. And I will give you the example for you and me of why you and I are not those people. We didn't figure it out in high school, and it took us a while to warm up in college. Why did it take a while to warm up? It wasn't just because the opportunities weren't there. The opportunities were there all along. We didn't take them. And then when we took them, we needed to experience them. We needed to figure it out. And then we figured it out, but we didn't know what any of it fucking meant, which is the worst thing, right? Like, I have all of this experience. I do have a professional career behind me. I spent 9 years in one organization doing multiple things. I can do anything, but I still cannot process what any of that means for my future yet, because I wasn't gifted that singular focus. Like, I read these autobiographies and watch these documentaries about, like, well, I just wanted to be in television, so I sacrificed everything because I knew I wanted to be in television, and I got in television and it was great. And I envy that to an extent, because I would give anything to have that one singular thing I can throw everything into. But I'm interested in so much more. And I can do so much more that it's like, I don't know.
I think you and I are very similar in that. Even like in my hobbies, like I don't have one hobby. I have 1,000 hobbies that I like do sporadically. Yeah. And it's like one day I'll do, I'll go out and become somewhat okay at archery now. Oh, I'll start making beer. Oh, I'm going to learn how to make bread and broth. And now we're going to learn how to ferment. And I'm going to learn programming. And I'm going to learn, and it's like all of these like little things, and you learn. And part of that, I think, is why the practice of law attracted me at first, because the saying goes is that in order to be an attorney, you have to be a jack of all trades, right? You have to know a little bit about everything. And then the phrase goes is that, a jack of all trades, which is kind of like colloquially anymore thought to be a bad thing. It's not, though.
Oh, no. Because again, my favorite thing is sending my resume to somebody I'm networking with, and I always get 2 responses. From different people. Half the people tell me you're all over the place, you need to focus, and the other half say you're so well balanced you'll get hired tomorrow.
Well, yeah, that's what being a well-rounded person is.
How can both of those things be true, though, right? Like, how can I get hired tomorrow if I pick a specialty, or if I continue to be who I am as a well-rounded person? Like, those two things don't jive at all. But again, I look at what you say about hobbies, and I go, well, yeah, like I play guitar, I play bass. I just picked up the drums again. I enjoy my writing and my reading and editing all of this stuff. And we are all over this place. And what's worse is, and I think I don't mean to get like all soapboxy and like
No, you're
blame a generation, but
Do
I
it.
feel like boomers specifically when hiring or when I'm networking with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked a little bit about this on the blog recently about how like they discount my passion projects because I'm not doing them for money. But I also feel like they don't understand how things can be applicable because they aren't there. So a lot of boomers, and I don't mean this, except I do. A lot of boomers that are hiring are looking towards their retirement in a year, 2, 3, or 5, right? So they're not thinking about how what I can bring to the table is applicable next year because they're not going to be there. So they don't care. And I'm not saying they've checked out, but at a certain point, I network with these people that could hire me. And I go, the reason that you're not asking the right questions is because either A, you don't know how, or B, if you did, none of these things would come to fruition while you were still there. You're going to retire. You're done. You've checked out. And so I have to be waiting for that next thing, for that next wave to be able to be in charge of the budget so they can go, oh, you can edit audio? Can you edit video? Like, because those things are, while they aren't the same, they are applicable. If you can do one, you can do the other. And if you can write, you can write it, and so I have these talks with people. They don't ask the right question. And I don't mean to pick on them because they're giving me of their time. And most of them have a little bit of good advice to share. But I need to get better at this as a personal thing. Like, I just need to start taking control and just being like, this is what I can do and how it's applicable to you. I need to do your work for you for this because clearly you're not getting it. But
once they hit a certain age, I mean, and then again, this is stuff that my wife had experienced immediately after getting out of law school, not even out of law school, just 1 year in law school, going back to her job as a paralegal, and her boss is trying to tell her how to do this, asking her to do something, right, to write a complaint or something like that. And she realized that the form complaint that the guy had been using for years didn't include a crucial area of law that we had just learned.
Yeah.
Because he had been doing it the same way for 40 some fucking years. And hasn't decided to try to update it. And so she's like, you've never heard of like negligence per se? And he's like, what's that? and so it's like she had to include it in, and it was what won them the case because it was blatantly there. Yeah, there's a thing about the fact, I mean, to go back to the idiom, right? Jack of all trades, master of none. That's where most people stop. But there's a second half to that phrase. Do you know what it is?
No.
Jack of all trades, master of none, certainly better than a master of one.
I have heard that. Now that you say that rings somewhere in the echoes of my memory.
And so that's the full phrase. The phrase is that you knowing and being a well-rounded person and knowing a little bit about everything is much better than just having all of the knowledge in the world on one topic, because then you're only good at one thing. I'm moderately okay at a lot of things. And so I can get by a little bit better in the real, and I can start to apply the knowledge, like you said, of one thing that sort of can apply to another. Which, and through teaching, I've learned that like you can find analogies in anything.
Yeah. And,
I mentioned that like one of my errant hobbies is archery. There's
I hope those arrows don't go errant.
No, they don't, because my neighbor's house is behind it. One of the ideas is the archer's mindset. And the archer's mindset is that like a lot of people in the world think like they either hit it or they miss, right? Well, an archer doesn't hit or miss. There are consecutive rings. And just because you didn't get a 10 didn't mean you didn't get a 9.
Yeah.
And a 9 is still pretty fucking good.
Yeah.
It's not binary. Nothing in this world is binary. There's just shades of like better to worse. And just because you didn't hit it perfect doesn't mean you didn't still do a damn good job. And that's still to be commended, right? And that's something that like you take from something completely unrelated, but then could apply to a lot of areas of your life. And it's being able to do that and having multiple hobbies and being it like, I started learning video editing for my videos and started learning streaming, which then applies to like improv and being able to think off the cuff and being able to multitask, which then goes back into teaching and how to teach and to manage a classroom, which feeds back into the streaming thing, which then how to entertain, how to critically think, and then how to get students to engage with me. And all of it ends up feeding into itself. And because if I was that type of person who just dove straight into teaching, I'd be one of those like hoity-toity, like buttoned up professors who sat in his office all day and just read the same however many theses that existed and be regurgitating the same information. And my students, when they give me my reviews at the end of each semester, consistently on these reviews list about how, they feel as if I make learning fun. Because I make and this is what they tell me, but it's also something that I pride myself on, that I make the information, meaningful to them in the sense that I relate it to real life or things that they experience. And that can be through any number of ways. But it's like, because as opposed to just learning something in the textbook, I'm like, all right, well now let's say, have any of you, ever been pulled over in a car? And then, you get to raise their hands. And then I'm like, well, and then I'm able to incorporate whatever we just talked about into that scenario. And then they're like, oh, and it clicks. And they'll never forget that because now the memory is meaningful. Because in order to learn, in order to make it to make a lasting memory, you need to connect it with something that's meaningful to you, right? It's harder to memorize a random assortment of numbers than if I were to give you just a random assortment of numbers. But if I said 8675309,
Jenny,
you'll remember that series of numbers because that has meaning to you, right? The way that I exemplify it when I teach psychology is I give a random string of numbers. And then I separate them out into like 1776, 8675309, and like 570, which is like the area code from where I live. And so like they're like, oh yeah, now remember those as opposed to remembering a series of 20-some numbers. Now you're memorizing 3 series that that have a meaning to you. 1776, everybody knows. 8675309 isn't necessarily working anymore. So I'll have to think of another one, but 570 works, right? I'll think of another number for whatever. But yeah, it's making meaningful memories. That's really, and then at a broader, if I didn't go to law school, I wouldn't have my current teaching philosophy, which I learned from one of my law school professors. And it was the first thing he said to us. And the first thing he said to us, like we come in, it's orientation. And he gets up and he says, my job is to make myself obsolete. And like, you're like, what the fuck? And he's like, my job is not to teach you specific areas of law or whatever. My job is to make you able to go out there and teach yourself. And that's how I view my job currently now. My job is to give these kids, not to teach, like they need to know certain things. But it's hopefully to inspire them with that urge to go out and learn more. And to, if they have a question about something in the world, to how can they find the right answer, right? How to the idea of like teaching critical thinking skills, which has been kind of like a fucking buzzword in education since we were little.
Yeah.
But nobody's ever been able to define it. That's what it is. Critical thinking is the ability to be able to take a problem and figure it out practically. Where to find the right information, and then how to apply that information to the problem that you have. Because the thing is that in the real world, you're not going to have a teacher there to just tell you the answer, right? Because we've all learned as adults that like, oh, adults really don't know what the fuck they're doing. That's the only difference between adults and like kids is we got to pay taxes now. And people look to us like we know what we're doing, and everybody's just fucking pretending. Like even people in government, none of them know what they're doing. They're all just they're the same as us, and really they all still see themselves as those, kids in high school who still don't know what the fuck they're doing, but now they're in positions of power and have to pretend. And the people who pretend and start to believe their own lies about them knowing, they're the terrible people. But the people who are willing to admit, like, I don't know, but I'm going to figure it out. Those are the good ones. And hopefully what I do with my kids is I teach them that it's okay to say I don't know, and to try to find the problem and to ask for help while doing it. But all of that's a long way of saying that, like, I've been able to work what I learned in law school into my profession. So even though it was kind of like the long way around, I'm glad I went this way, because I wouldn't be the same teacher.
There's not much more to add to this episode, but there are two things I would like to reiterate. When Rob talks about the archer's mindset, that it's not all or nothing, and that nothing is binary, and it's all shades of better or worse, he's 100% correct. In divisive times, it's important to remember, in the end, everything is shades of gray, and we would all be better to remember that more often. Second, diversification is important. It's not only a means of survival, but don't put all your eggs in one basket. It can lead to a more fulfilling life. So, of course, Rob and I are always searching, but that is because we not only embrace, but personify the saying, Jack of all trades, master of none, certainly better than a master of one. So, with that in mind, pick up a new book, a new hobby, a new skill, or even revisit something from your past, and then keep on. You'll like some, others you won't, but just keep going. You never know where you'll end up. And feel free to share with me the things you enjoy. Perhaps I will enjoy them too. Thanks for listening to the Palmer Files, episode 58. As a reminder, all links are available in the show notes, and now for the official business. The Palmer Files releases every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. If you're still listening, I encourage you to join the discussion. You can tweet me at Agent Palmer and this show at The Palmer Files. You can find Rob on Twitch, where he streams a Professor Plays, and Big Brain streams on twitch.tv/FPEskra. That's FPSKRA. Or you can visit his YouTube channel by going to tinyurl.com/bigbrainlecture. Email can be sent to this show at thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. And remember, your home for all things Agent Palmer is agentpalmer.com. All right, Rob, do you have one final question for me?
What happens when we die?
Okay, so I haven't really been thinking about this, except that I have. So the way this works is, I feel like I tell this story all the time now, but I've been reading all of the books in my house, or I'm trying to read all the books in my house. And there are a lot of religious texts in my house, specifically Jewish texts in my house. And I have been avoiding them like the plague, because I know that when I go down that rabbit hole, I have to be in the right headspace. I can't just pick up one of those books, even if it's not like a religious text, but I have a lot of books about Judaism. Maybe not novels per se, but definitely not like the Tanakh, like here are the rules, here's the, a lot more philosophy of religion books, I guess. And so I got to be in the right headspace. And so, but I know, especially when they're written in the right way, then they talk about that. And one of the things that I know already, and this is why I bring that up, is in Judaism, we don't believe in an after. This is it. Okay? This is what you get. And whether we're right or we're wrong is immaterial, because you can ask this question to 100 people and get 100 different answers. Or if you're at the right kind of place, you might get one answer over and over and over again. But all of that is to say that I kind of, even though I'm more of a cultural Jew than anything, to me, I believe in that to an extent where this is it. This is all we get. However, I have been thinking, based on a previous episode of this podcast, about a book by Clive Barker called The Great and Secret Show, which is not only metaphysical, but it talks about what else there might be. Whether it's an afterwards or the dream world. Okay? And so, because that's been floating in my head, I've kind of been thinking about it to a certain extent. And I feel like the best we can do, not that I have to relate it to what you now do as a teacher, but the best we can do is leave behind better than we had. Right? So
I like that.
If, for example, you, in a practical sense, are a teacher and you can leave behind knowledge for those students that you touch, great. Like, even if you died tomorrow, the students that you have touched and taught to think, as opposed to just taught to answer, hopefully they will go on and make the world a better place and teach other people the same thing. And to that extent, hopefully this podcast, by sharing your story and the others, will influence people in a way, since I don't really have a career at the moment. Like, hopefully, at the very least, this will put something good out into the world. And sharing these stories and these sentiments and these rants and these arguments and discussions will make the world a better place for the people that listen to them. So what happens when we die? I mean, it's not really in my nature to figure it out. I get this, right? I get this. This is what I have. Boy, like, let's make it work.
That's nice. I like that.